Thanks. Hey, well, first of all, thank you for inviting me. This is such a pleasure. Second, it is so cool to see a whole bunch of people I didn't know what happened to them in their life, and this is what happened to them. So I look forward to following up with you later. I've always wanted to meet Kirsten, who's just on the stage. I actually know her more from the sodium world. I cited her work, and technically I'm on the American Heart Association Sodium Reduction Task Force, although I seem to miss all the calls. So Kirsten, if you're on those calls, I just was busy all those days. Sorry, but Kirsten does amazing work in sodium reduction. So I never thought I would see her here. So loving this world. To transition from the last talk, sorry if I'm going off topic a little bit, that diet soda question was a really important question, and I just wanted to add to it. I served on the American Heart Association's nutrition committee, and we're supposed to tackle positions that are tough to take. So American Heart came out with positions that receive less added sugar. So the public wrote back and said, does that mean we should eat artificial sweeteners? And we didn't have a position. So they asked if anybody was a specialist, and none of us were. And they said, who's stupid enough to sign up to be the writing chair of this? And I raised my hand. And so they signed me to be the writing chair of a topic of which I knew nothing about. And 5 colleagues helped me assemble all the evidence that we could find on artificial sweeteners. And it was stunningly a paucity of data on this topic. And at the end of spending about a year on this, I'm going to oversimplify and say our main conclusion was that there weren't enough data to make a conclusion. But we had to say something. And so he said, a lot of this makes sense that it could help, but there isn't really compelling evidence that it helps. And a lot of the data were in diet sodas and regular sodas. That's actually the cleanest kind of study. You keep your diet the same. And the only thing you switch is a diet soda or a regular soda. Well, at one point we were prepared to say, there really isn't compelling evidence that there is a benefit to this. We hope better studies will be done. And we had a certified diabetes educator on our group who said, you can't say that. I counsel diabetic patients. I moved them from regular soda to diet soda. I would love to move them to water. I really want them to drink water. But I moved them from regular soda to diet soda. If you tell them there's no difference, they're going to go back to regular soda. And my job's just going to get harder. So don't make my job harder. So it was one of these, yes, diet studies are so confusing to do. And so that's what Priya asked me to do. I don't actually have a lot of kid experience other than I have 4 kids. I have a couple slides at the end to give me a little street credibility, street cred with kids. But mostly I'm going to talk about my experience trying to run nutrition studies where we take challenging questions and try to answer them. Okay, ready? So I was going to talk about weight loss and weight loss diets, and I'm going to start with this slide. I think there's actually a group working on this right now, but the last set of national recommendations we had for choosing a diet that would support weight loss and weight loss maintenance, was this from 1998, and it says eat a low-fat diet, which is so last century, okay? That's what we have. There isn't really a different update to that from a recognized panel. What I find really frustrating in this field is that all of these things oversimplify carbohydrates, which are very complicated. They oversimplify fats, which are very complicated. And they often leave out protein in the carbohydrate versus low-fat wars. And protein itself is really fascinating and complicated. And then when you try to boil that all down to my plate, it looks like maybe that's a simple way to move forward with this icon, but there's so many different ways to interpret this. So how do I do it as a scientist and try to find ways that could inform the way public policy moves forward and how you folks work with the populations that you have access to? So here's an outline of what I'm going to try to go through today in 45 minutes. Wait, where's the iPad that's telling me how much time I have? Oh, thanks. Okay. Oh. All right, I'll set my own watch so I can try to keep myself on time. All right, stand up and jump up and down if I go too long, if I don't see that better. So we have a bunch of trials on this. And a while ago, this was a set of trials that were done that are all they were short, they had a lot of dropouts, they didn't do very good diet assessment, but they started moving the field forward, saying yes, maybe low fat isn't the only thing. We'll do some other trials, and we'll see. But they weren't very definitive. I'm going to leap forward to suggest that if we look back over that last decade, this is the biggest trial ever done for weight loss and diets. So this is Harvard and the Pennington Group in Louisiana. 800 people followed for 2 years. I don't know how many $1 million it cost, but it was the biggest. Really, right? This is like the who's who list of nutrition gurus in this field between Harvard and Pennington. And I'll show you the main result of this study, which had 4 different diets, which in just a minute I'm going to tease apart for you. But the main result was the weight loss trajectory in the 4 diets. Probably don't need a PhD to see that they all look the same. The trajectories all look the same. And so the main conclusion of this was, it really doesn't matter what you eat. You just have to eat less. Now that is brilliant. No one ever thought of saying that before. So it's kind of stunning that all those millions of dollars got spent on this hugely helpful public health message, just eat less, right? That's helpful. Are we done? Yeah! All right, so let me dive a little deeper into this, because this is my field, and it's frustrating to figure out how to communicate this. Boy, this is such an elegant design. So the folks who thought this up were interested in low fat and low carb and protein at the same time. And they designed a set of 4 diets that could potentially answer all the questions in one study. So 2 of the diets were at 2 levels of fat, 20 versus 40. For those of you who are nutrition-oriented folks, that's fairly low fat, and that's pretty high fat in the nutrition world. And 2 of them were low and high protein, but different too, like mismatch. So 15 and 25% protein. That's pretty low protein and pretty high. Most of you guys would probably get between 15 and 20. 15 might be on the low side, but you might be at 15. And if you do that, you end up with 4 levels of carbohydrate. Oh, how cool. All right, so in the same study, you do low fat, low carb, and low protein, and high. Also, this will answer everyone's questions at once. And they did it, they finished the study, got published in the New England Journal of Medicine, and the answer is it doesn't matter what you eat as long as you reduce calories. So I tend to look at the methods and some of the process evaluations. So let's go there. 24 months, this is what they were actually eating. And let me see how to phrase this. So basically, of 400 of the 800 people, they did an extensive amount of 24-hour recalls with them. Not all, because that's too expensive. So thousands of them. And as these people were reporting, so imagine, they just spent years getting coached by somebody. I'm always worried in self-report that they're trying to make the coaches happy, telling them they're doing better than they really are. So if anything, I'm going to guess these results are better than they really were. We can go into that later if you want. So their goal was to have a 20 versus 40% fat diet, and this is what they got. Okay, so they got about a third of their goal, if that makes sense. With me so far? Okay, so then their protein goal was 15 versus 25, and the whole range that they had was 20 versus 21. That's not even a hypothesis that can be tested at this point, all right? Cross that one off. New study to do that one. And the carb is going to be fantastic. It's going to range from 35 to 65. They got a third of that. And among my community, their lowest carbohydrate diet of 43% wouldn't be considered a low carb diet. We have an ongoing study right now that Lisa Sharon helped us design, and their baseline diet is 45% carbohydrate. So their lowest carbohydrate diet is our usual care, right? So they didn't test low carb either. So, they had an elegant design, but they didn't pull it off. And if you read the paper, it says, oh, by the way, at 6 months and 2 years, we failed to reach the targets of the diet. But just so you know, diet macronutrient distribution doesn't matter, just lower calories. That's why these things are confusing, is you have to get adherence, you have to design them well, you have to communicate them. And you know what? To be honest, real people are a pain in the butt. They don't listen. They have issues. They've lost their job. They got busy. Their family sabotages them. So these are really hard to pull off. So I'll show you the most recent one that came out that's really annoying. So we are in the middle of yet another low-carb, low-fat study that I'll tell you about at the end, as if we needed another one. But we do. I'll tell you later why we do. So this came out in 2014, and once again the headline said, oh, thank God, there's another study showing that we now know what it is. Low carb wins. That whole low fat thing is this huge conspiracy theory. Now that we have a new answer from a new study published in a really hot major journal, the Annals of Internal Medicine, Apparently low carb is a winner, so the objective was to compare low fat to low carb. I'll stop just for a minute and just pretend I had 100 index cards and I handed them all out. And I asked you to tell me what a low carb diet is and what a low fat diet is. I bet a couple are going to say, wait, did you mean grams or percent? And then if I clarified grams or percent, I bet I would get 50 different numbers for grams and 50 different numbers for percent. And some similar ones, but I bet I'd get a huge range. So here's what they picked. 40 grams a day for a low carb diet and 30% for fat, low fat diet. All right. So I'm already annoyed right here. I don't know if you know why, but I'm already annoyed. But I'm going to give you some more data. You probably can't see these numbers, so I'm going to help. I'm going to blow some of these numbers up for you. This is all the diet data they had across the year that they did in 100 plus people, and they actually did assess their adherence to the diet. Some of these folks don't even assess it. They just assign it and say we assigned them. That always makes me worried, because I know how bad adherence is. And once again, these are people who have to tell staff professionals what they're eating, and I'm always assuming if anything, they're trying to make them happy, and this is better than they really did. Okay? And the large majority of them finished. I think 80% plus finished, which is good retention. So the study actually has quite a few things to say for it. But if you look back to what they were eating in the beginning, that's how many carbs in grams they were eating, and that's what percent of fat they were eating. So in terms of randomizing this half of the whole conference here to low carb, and this half to low fat, let's talk about how ambitious that is. So for the low carb folks who are eating 242 grams a day, I need you to go to 40. So basically I need you to cut 5/6 of all the carbohydrates out of your diet. Not trivial. Everybody agree? Not trivial. Okay, let's talk to you guys. Are you sweating it now? How hard? Are you gonna have to work? Okay, your diet is 35% fat and I need you to plummet to 30. Okay? You look scared. Several of you are shaking. Actually, you're not. It's like, that's probably a rounding error, which I think it is, right? So, I'm already annoyed at the study design. One group gets this wildly ambitious goal, another group gets lip service. I'm done. I'm not going to look at the results. The results were, I'll tell you, I don't even have a results slide. I don't even remember, honestly, because I'm so disturbed by this. But I think the low carb group lost like 4 kilos at the end, and the low fat group lost 2 kilos at the end. It was barely statistically significant. So the paper said low carb is better than low fat. Okay? So let's go out and see what they did. So 12 months later, that's how many grams of carbs the two were eating. And that's the percentages of fat the two groups were eating. So if we just focus on the grams of carb that the low folks were getting, if the objective was 40 grams a day, they only got part of the way there. And the average was 127. That's the average. You all realize that means half of them are eating more than 127. That's not like what everybody was eating. Okay, so I think they have to stop. They proposed a diet that people didn't follow, so they're done. How can you publish that? And the low fatters, yes, their goal was 30 and they got to 30, but that's the average. So that means half of them were higher than that. So half of them actually didn't get to the goal. All right, how many dietitians do you have in the audience today? We must have several. Okay, dietitians, get ready for this. You desperately need a job. Whoever just had you last, that lost you. You were so excited to work on this NIH-funded research study. And your job is to teach the best possible low-fat diet you can to your participants. And you look at their baseline diet, which is a pitiful 15 or so grams of fiber. Okay, who can think of anything low-fat that might have fiber? Can you think of one or two things that's low-fat that might have fiber? Could it be like all the beans and all the grains and all the vegetables? So you'd be thinking, in my heart of hearts, oh my gosh, one of the ways I'm going to help these people is I'm going to help them increase their fiber intake on the road to eating this great low-fat diet that I'm teaching them. So 12 months later, they're eating the same number of pitiful grams of fiber that they were eating at the beginning. Okay, your butt is fired. That's all you did. You got them to eat 15 grams of fiber after working with them for a year. Done. But the newspaper says, yet another study has been done, and it has now been shown again that low carb is better than low fat. To me, this is why the field is confusing. We have a very difficult time defining diets. We have a difficult time getting people to adhere to diets. And we also have a difficult time assessing how adherent they were. And then the newspaper takes it and grabs a headline out of it, right? So I just don't know what to do with studies like this. So now let's trash one of my own studies, because this is so much fun ragging on other people's studies. Let's rag on one of mine. And not too bad, because Risa Sharon helped design this study too. So this is the A to Z study that was published in 2005, and we were interested in a similar question. We took a slightly different approach. Instead of choosing percentages, we picked popular diet books. Now, if I had more time, I'd push you a little on this, but I'm just going to give you the punchline. It's sort of a low-carb, low-fat study, but not really. It's just really a popular diet book study, because they differ on how many recipes they had in the books, they differ on how much they talked about supplements, they differed on how much they covered exercise. So we picked them intentionally because they represented a spectrum. That's why A to Z is such a cool name. I love the name. Sorry. Only cool acronym we've ever had for one of our studies. So it does represent the spectrum of low carb to low fat. But it really is a popular diet book with the one in the middle, this Learn Manual, not being popular. This is Kelly Brownell from Yale. This is basically health professionals, follow the food pyramid, and eat fewer calories with lots of behavior modification strategies. So it's kind of usual care versus 3 challengers that are New York Times bestsellers saying that the health professionals don't know what they're talking about. So try these diets that are contrary to your health professional's advice. All right, so let's show you the adherence to our study guide. So we actually did 3,000 24-hour dietary recalls in these 300 women over the course of a year. And the way we did it is Risa met every single one of the 300 women for 8 weeks straight, and basically read the book aloud to them, but in a much more clever, engaging way than just reading. And so at the end of 8 weeks, they definitely had heard the material and were as excited as they possibly could be. And this is the best they did for adherence, okay? And then we didn't shame them or judge them if they weren't getting it. We said, you've got the book and you're following it the best you can, right? Okay, so here's what happens at 6 months. They slip. I'm not actually going to show you the ones in the middle, just for the sake of time. I'll tell you the ones in the middle weren't so far apart to begin with from their baseline diet. They merged together, and at the end, they were basically the same as their baseline diet. So let's just write them off for now and look at the 2 extremes, which end up being the most helpful from this study to go back and compare to. If you go out to 12 months, they really didn't slip much more. And if my sleight of hand removed those 2 groups in the middle, I would say these 2 groups are pretty different at 12 months out. They are not eating the same diet. So I actually think we have the right to compare and see how these guys are doing. And in our study, it was actually that Atkins, I thought I had a different slide here. Anyway, here's the main results, where sort of Atkins won, and that's what the paper said, Atkins won. I'm a little concerned that our study was only 1 year, and if you added another year on the x-axis there, I see that trajectory going back up. I'm going to guess they were all the same at 2 years. I'm not sure. If it really was a low carbohydrate thing, Atkins was the lowest carbohydrate, and Zone was the second lowest carbohydrate. So if it's really all about carb, it would have been Atkins, followed by Zone, followed by Learn, followed by Ornish. It wasn't. In fact, Zone and Atkins were the only 2 diets, technically, that were statistically different than one another. So the only significant finding in weight loss from this study is low carbohydrate diets differ from one another. That's not a very sexy headline. That's actually quite difficult to articulate in a newspaper, so way better to say Atkins wins. So they did. All right, so let's look at these diets a year out. So it's really not the Atkins diet anymore. It's definitely lower carbohydrate than what we've been promoting. It's not the Atkins diet. And in fact, Dean Ornish isn't talking to me anymore because of this. He said, you can't publish that and say that that's the Ornish diet. That's not. And I said, Dean, give him your book. Did you provide a dietitian with your book? He said, no. I said, well, I gave him your book for free and a dietitian, and she read it out loud to them, and that's what they do when they're following your book. I would agree that's not your diet as you intend to show it. So whenever I present these results, I don't really say this is the Ornish diet. I say in the people that you work with, in real people, reading that book, this is what they end up with, which I think, interestingly, looks like the national guidelines. That's why I put the other pie chart there. I think shooting for Ornish and falling short puts you smack dab in the guidelines we proposed in 1998. Anybody buy that? You like that sleight of hand? Okay, I'm going to go with that for now. So now, it isn't really Atkins Ornish. Now, what it is the national guidelines that we've had for 30 years versus the low-carb challenger. Technically, the lower carb diet won in everything that was statistically significant. They lost more weight, their HDLs went up more, and their blood pressure went down more. Anything that was statistically significant favored the diet that people had been vilifying for a long time. Even when they weren't really following it, it's like what they fell into as they fell short of trying to follow it. Oh my God, that is such a mouthful. How do you actually tell people what you just said? The funniest one, actually, this one I love. So, very serious from the zone diet was kind of annoyed too that his book didn't win. So he looked at the data again, and he called me up and he said, you know, I kind of like the results. I thought, wait, I thought you were going to be mad. I said, no. No, really, that last pie chart, that's closer to my diet than any of the other ones. So really, my diet wins. And say, okay, wait, this is really, wow, this is stretching me. So what you're suggesting is, in order to follow your diet, I have to ask them to follow somebody else's diet, so that when they fall short, they fall into your diet. So I can't actually recommend your diet. I have to recommend the other diet to get them there, and I'm not sure what he answered at that point. So, and you wonder why we have a hard time translating this to you, to the public, right? It's so frustrating. Okay, and then we're not even talking about carbs, because carbohydrates are different across the groups too. And there's some very interesting contrived studies where what they've done is held fat constant and manipulated the carb and protein, or held carb constant and manipulated the protein and fat. And every time they did that, protein won in a number of relevant categories: satiety, triglyceride lowering, HDL raising, even weight. Those are smaller, more contrived, almost feeding studies to get the control you need. Because actually, if you remember from that pounds lost study I showed you, when you try to get people to eat different protein diets, they don't really do it. It just sort of sinks into this hole. It's pretty similar. So you have to try really hard to manipulate protein and one of the other macronutrients. So it's a good question, but it's hard to pull off in real people. All right, so my conclusion from this first part is this set of issues here. I'll let you read them yourself. At the end of the day, the main conclusion is these are just really hard studies to pull off. We don't do a good job of it. They're not long enough. We don't get good enough adherence. Oops, sorry, I'll leave that one up. Thanks. And so this is kind of where we are in this field. All right. So I think probably we've been asking the wrong question, to be honest. Looking for the right diet. So we have a new way of thinking, especially because it's so hard to test that old question. So one of my friends from Duke, Will Yancey, published this weight loss study. It's low carb and low fat in it, and there's a drug involved, orlistat. Let's not go there for the moment. Usually in medical journals, all we get to publish are the average results. I love that he got to publish the individual trajectories of every person in his study. So what I find fascinating here is somebody lost 30% of their weight. Yep, percent. And somebody lost 0, and everybody else is in between on both diets. I think that is really cool. They got the same advice, and they had this massively different response to the same diet. And here's somebody who did a diet very similar to ours, actually 3 out of 4 of the same group. So they used Weight Watchers instead of Learn. They had massive dropout. They had 50% dropout in 2 of the arms. The red line represents the average, which doesn't look like the average, but that's after you can make everybody who dropped out equals 0. So forget the red line, even though that's the average. Look how varied these responses were within each diet group to the same advice. I think this is so fascinating. So let's look at our study. So let's take our lowest carb and our lowest, I thought I had a different slide. All right, so here's our 4 diets, and here's a way of presenting all the women's results in our study individually instead of as averages. So now the pattern of weight loss is stunningly similar across the 4. And now what you see is, and then you probably can't see the kilos, the numbers are too small, but the y-axis is kilos. Some women in all the groups are losing 20, 25, and 30 kilos, and some of them are gaining 5 and 10 kilos. So I think the coolest thing is there's a 30-kilo range of difference within each diet group. Between each diet group, the average difference is a few pounds. Within each diet group, the variability is 30 kilos. Oh my gosh, I love this. So, what would explain that? I'm going to go really quickly through this part because I just got updated on my time. I'm going to tell you this slide, and this slide, and this slide, and this slide. All get to the same thing, which is people who are more insulin resistant have a harder time in a low-fat, high-carbohydrate diet because they're getting a lot of carbs while they're trying to do that low-fat thing and having a hard time putting it away. So when we went back to our A to Z study, we kind of split them into the most insulin-sensitive and insulin-resistant using a very crude measure. We found of all the groups losing weight, the one that had the hardest time losing weight was the ones who were insulin-resistant, being assigned to Ornish, and not following it, but falling into the national guidelines of low fat. That's the single group that lost the least amount of weight, trying to follow the national guidelines. Okay? Now here's a little side topic. This won't make sense, so I'll give you the slide after this. A postdoc looked at our old data and said, I wonder how much adherence matters. So she broke all three of the popular diet books into the most and the least adherent. Okay, now this is a stunning conclusion, so get ready, this gets complicated. If you followed the diet, you lost weight, and if you didn't follow it, you didn't lose weight. Everybody with me on that? You want to run through it again? Okay, now, I bet you get it. So look at the red bars and tell me, picture some of the women in that group. Oh, those slothful, almost immoral, unethical women who just couldn't read the whole book, couldn't stick with it. Don't you just feel sorry for how lazy and no willpower whatsoever? Okay, well that's not really how I feel, because another postdoc looked at this another way and said, I wonder if adherence differs by insulin resistance status. Because we never told them that we had done this side project with insulin resistance. So, I hope this makes sense, and I'm not going too fast. But we split the women in the Atkins group into the lowest and highest insulin resistance groups. And we wanted to see how well they adhered to the diet. And to be honest, they both kind of adhered the same way. Big diversion from their baseline diet initially, and then some backsliding, but they were still very different at the end of the 12 months. And it didn't matter if they were insulin resistant or insulin sensitive. Here's the women who got assigned to Ornish. And right off the bat, they were having a hard time adhering to the diet if they were more insulin resistant. And in fact, from 6 months on, they weren't really any different than their baseline diet. But they didn't know they were insulin resistant. So were they not following the diet because they weren't losing any weight, or were they not losing any weight because they weren't following the diet? And if they weren't following the diet because they were insulin resistant, it was actually not willpower, but metabolic predisposition to not do well on a diet that's not matched to them. I don't know if you guys got that, but that's what we're kind of after. All right, so our take on this is insulin-resistant folks, we think, have a harder time adhering to the national guidelines that have been shoving down everybody's throat for the last 30 years. And more of the population is getting insulin-resistant as they get more and more overweight. So we've been undermining them with our own advice, possibly. So I think rather than trying to find the best diet, we ought to see if we could match them. So we have this new ongoing study. I have to make short of this because I have a final happier note to end on. So here's my third outcome, or my third outline point of the day. So Risa is responsible for this icon, which I show again and again, right? So we're doing low carb and low fat. But here's the easiest way to explain this. If Ornish or McDougall or Pritikin came into our office and saw what we were serving for low fat, they would be blown away. Say, oh my God, that is amazing what you're doing. We are so proud that you are representing low fat so well. As would Lauren Cordain from the Paleo Guide or any of the low carb fanatics. If they saw what we were doing for low carb, they would be pleased. Because we don't have a bias. We don't actually think one diet is going to be better than the other. We think both diets will be better for some women and men. Sorry, there's men in this one too. Right? So these are farmers market organic berries and whole grain pasta and organic skim milk. And over here we got an organic avocado and pasture-raised egg and grass-fed beef And then in the middle, everybody's supposed to eat a salad every single day. Because I can make a high-fat salad by adding nuts and seeds and olive oil. I can make it low-fat by just putting lemon and balsamic vinegar on. Okay? So, huge emphasis of this study is quality. And then to make sure they're really eating different diets, we call this the titrate limbo quality method. So, in the limbo part, they're supposed to go to 20 grams of carb or 20 grams of fat for the first 8 weeks. You tell them we made this number up. It doesn't mean anything other than we're trying to anchor you at an insanely low point because we anticipate recidivism. We're even giving you permission to titrate back up once you get to that really low point. Try to find that point where it's as low as you think you can stay forever and not be hungry, and be satiated, be happy, but be different than the other guys. So this is the study that we're doing, and we've got some diet assessment results we practice. The avocado board heard we were doing this, and they gave us $500,000 to practice with avocados, because that's why I put that avocado in the picture there. So that's my conflict of interest disclosure. Haas gave me $500,000, okay? So if that's what their habitual diet looks like, this is what it looked like 3 months in. This is after they got as low as they could and we allowed them to titrate back up. And did they maintain it to 6 months? Pretty well. The carb was too low to maintain, but the fat was maintained. And in the practice study, we did something really crazy. We switched them, and everybody tried the opposite diet. So here they are switching to the opposite diet. They don't do quite as well, but almost as well, learning the other diet after they learned the first one. And then they maintained that pretty well out to 12 months. So, and this is how many calories they had. These are not realistic. There's no way these overweight people are eating 2,000 calories a day, but we know that. And so, give them credit. And they've said they're decreasing 500 calories a day. Don't really think they are, but we want to give them credit for it. So let's admit that these diet data are imperfect, but let's summarize all the low-carb phases and all the low-fat phases together. And then actually, let's focus on 6 and 12 months, because those are the farthest time points out. And these are not feeding them, they're cooking, they're buying themselves, everything. And remember, our main goal is to make sure we have equally rigorous, equally ambitious, very different diets at the end, maximized in quality. And so if I kind of lump those together, that's what we're getting. And let me go back to the pounds lost study, and then I'll come back to this. Here's the biggest, best funded study ever. The two outlier diets were the highest fat and the lowest fat, and the highest carb and the lowest carb. And if I do them the same way I did the other one, this is the best previously that had been done to compare low fat and low carb. I don't really think that's very ambitious for low carb and low fat, because we got this with the Reese's help. So now we think we can go ahead and test this. And we're not done, but we've enrolled 470 people. The last 130 are being enrolled now. And we are having some fun. I want to again be a little modest about this and say, now let's dig down into some individuals. So here's one individual following Reese's advice on low fat. Pretty good. We told them quality, and they got it. I'm going to let you look at that just for a few seconds. Did you buy that? Reese is beaming over here in the front house. She is so proud. I can't tell you. You know, IRB and everything. I can't tell you who ID14 is, but boy, are we proud of ID14. And yet, she also had ID36, and now she's hanging her head, and it's no fault of yours, Reese. We completely leave you off the hook. But seriously, they had a scone for breakfast, they had a freaking soda for lunch. Oh yeah, that's low fat, thanks a lot. Yeah, low fat soda, makes sense to me. Oh my God, and Alfredo, I'm sure that comes in the low fat version. And the chocolate cake you just had to have, and the red wine, honestly, is low fat. Okay, so these people got the same advice, and it's better advice than we gave before, and we still get massive individual heterogeneity. So this one's not low fat at all. Come on. This is terrible. 45 grams of fiber? Yes, that's what we wanted. 50? No, that's that stupid study that just got published. But they're both in our studies. They're real people in our studies trying to follow our advice. They're not rats. Okay. Low carb. Any paleo folks out there, you should be proud, okay? Paleo proud, right? This looks probably pretty good. Look it over for just a minute. Okay, you know how everybody interprets paleo a little different? I'll show you different interpretations, sort of. Okay. So here we go. We got an omelet and pouring some half and half in the coffee, which you allow, that's okay. But look at this lunch. Oh my God, steak, pork ribs, and bratwurst in the same thing. Dinner is cheeseburger and sausage. Oh, woo. Dan, to be perfectly honest, this is the lower carb diet of the two. This is 5% carb, and the other one was 13. But it's 2,000 calories compared to 1,200. They're just wolfing down calories. It's the kind of variability we still get in our real studies with real people, and I have to try to account for it. I have to try to explain it when we publish it and put it in our averages, all right? So the key here is when we do these studies and we try to answer practical questions, this is, kids metabolically are not that different than adults. We've had a low-fat message forever. There's been a challenge it should be low carb. The message is too simple, and the way they follow it is so individualized. So the newer study, we're trying to characterize them metabolically for insulin resistance, genotypically, and can I say it, it's not dinner time yet, we're collecting their poop to see if we can microbiotically characterize it too, to see if sort of there's this fingerprint that would explain more and more and more of that individual variability in response to the diets, so we can help address the confusion. I don't know if we will, but we're working on addressing what we think is a lot of confusion about public health messages about carbs and fat, right? So let me just finish up with 2 minutes. There are 2 minutes left. Okay. Yeah, did you flash my 5 thing yet? 5 minutes, you just flashed me now. Okay, good. All right, so after having confused you, I feel like, are you the certified diabetes educator? I just showed you the results. I'm about to say, we don't have enough results to answer the question. You say, yeah, but I got to feed my kid or my school or whatever today. What am I going to go home and tell them? All right, honestly, I don't have compelling evidence that gives you the final answer because we're still working on it. But this is one of my frustrations. How many people are proud when they go see their physician? Sophie, what do you think? I had organic, low-fat yogurt. Can I get a hug from my physician today because I did the right thing? Except when I go to my grocery store, I see 1 row of plain. I see 27 rows of apple, peach, apricot, while the mango pear. Okay, well, I'm a raspberry slut. I will eat almost anything with raspberries in it, but I will not eat this, okay? So, plain has 3 ingredients, so raspberry should have 4. It should just have plain and raspberries. This is so not fair. Okay, so clearly it's crappy raspberries because they had sugar before they had the raspberries, and it doesn't have flavor and it doesn't have color. And it has 50% more calories for the same low fat. And the calories are all from sugar. This is what has undermined us as a public health message. Low fat got corrupted, really. Can we fix it? I don't know if we can fix it at this point. The food industry responded maybe to try to help us, but they're certainly profit-oriented, so that's a problem. Okay, so happier thought. I've been involved with this 11-acre organic farm in Sunnyvale in the grounds of middle school, and we started a summer camp where we had scholarships for underserved kids, and I got Stanford undergrads to get summer research funding, and for 4 years we've done it, and we're just about to kick off our 5th year. And these were the pioneers who started it. Every once in a while they're in the audience, but none of them are in the audience today. If you were and I didn't notice, you better stand up. Oh my God, is this heartwarming. This is so fabulous. So we actually have 2 weeks of 5 to 7-year-olds, 2 weeks of 8 to 10-year-olds, and 2 weeks of 11 to 14-year-olds. We try to stuff as many vegetables down their throats in 1 week as humanly possible without telling them that's the purpose of camp. And without telling them that the counselors are field researchers in stealth mode. And so Brittany has written a paper up, and we submitted it, and it's, it just got rejected, and one reviewer loved it, and the other reviewer hated it and said, where's the control group? And I said, oh my God, I'm back to medical school again, huh? Okay, I've got to have the control comparison group. Who's the control group to summer farm camp? Come on. Okay, so I'm trying to figure out how to do a new kind of research, but you have to wear a different hat to do that kind of thing. We see the kids every Friday at the end of the week of being at camp is Pizza Friday. The parents get asked to come an hour early. We have a cob oven, we made homemade crusts. It's too early in the summer actually to harvest tomatoes, so we get tomato sauce, and then they have to cover every inch of tomato sauce with veggies that they harvested. And the parents show up, there are 30 vegetable-dense pizzas sitting on a tray waiting for them, and they say, this won't work, Juanita only eats pepperoni pizza. And then an hour later, all the pizzas are gone, and a couple of the parents are crying, saying, oh my God, thank you. So I can't publish that, can I? It's not publishable. It's so much more satisfying than some of the other work that I do, because we're starting to understand some of the barriers. And so a little higher for kids. By the way, that was my street cred right there for kids. This is COBA, right? Children's obesity. That's it. That's like my whole street cred right there. My one, study with kids. I got older kids. I got students where I've taught human nutrition for 15 years, and some of my students are in here. And this is not human nutrition. In fact, we've never talked about health in this class. We talk about everything else by reading popular books and watching documentaries, and just added a few more scientific articles to the class this year than usual. And there's no midterms, quizzes, or tests. They have to write an op-ed and try to get them published. One of them just wrote me today. The op-ed got published. It was Allison who got her published. Allison B. got hers published today. YouTube behavior change. Ryan's working on this right now. I hope it'll be done by next Tuesday. Your group goes first. And they blog. And so they're reading about animal rights and welfare. And so we get into this whole thing. And then they're reading about environmental impacts of monocropping, etc. And then we're talking about diet for a hot planet. How many hippies, or people who had hippies for parents remember Frances Morley, diet for a small planet? This is her daughter, diet for a hot planet. How cool is that? And then Mary Nessel talks about food politics. And so the very first year we did this, we collected pre-post data on our students and students in 3 other human biology classes that dealt with health and nutrition, but not the way we did. And I can't believe they published this paper, so there is hope for publishing stuff. So comparing our class to 3 other classes, our students said they ate more healthfully without focusing on health at all, doing these other issues. And we have a graph. Scientific papers should have a graph, right? So here's our graph, and we have a cooled metric, and it says our kids ate more healthfully, but seriously, let's trash my own study here. They self-selected into my class. They had their names on the pre and post survey so that I could match them. And so they wanted to make me happy. I'm sure they said they were eating better to get a better grade. So on the one hand, this is a ridiculously poorly designed study. On the other hand, I think they published it because of the novel concept. So the idea here was not to motivate behavior change by educating with health, but to look at self-help, to look at other sources of motivation. And I can tell you, being in this class and watching people wrestle and get engaged in these decisions is so much more satisfying than trying to remind them how many milligrams of antioxidants they need over the next 7 days. It just works better the other way. So I've been doing that forever, and now I'm trying to do this. I'm not actually sure how to do this, but I know that when I achieve it, it does this anyway. So my current goal is to do more of a stealth health thing. It still accomplishes the same thing. The underlying thing is still health, but I get at it from another angle. So Priya and others invited me to do this for you today, and I brought this outline with me, and so I'll leave you with this set of thoughts. This whole idea of macronutrient distribution, proteins, carbs, and fats, it must sound to some people like fairly straightforward to address, and I hope I have convinced you that it is anything but straightforward to design, conduct, interpret, publish, and have reported in the press. It's just not straightforward. So if you're confused, this is why. So what should you choose today? I'm going to tell you to embrace variability. If you have people eating wildly different stuff, it might be okay. We really don't have one diet that's better for everybody. I wish I had better answers for you now. I hope we're moving in the direction where we can understand that individual variability better. At the end of the day, choose quality. Go to Full Circle Farm. Go to the farmer's market. You really can't screw up, and I don't have better data for you the other way, so you might as well do that anyway. And if this stealth health, stealth nutrition idea helps at all, I encourage you to employ that because it's kind of fun to try something different. Thank you very much for including me today.